A young boy walks into a barber shop. The barber leans in and says to his customer, "This is the dumbest kid in the world. Watch and see." The barber then places a dollar bill in one hand and 2 quarters in the other, calling the boy over and asking, "Which one do you want, kid?" The boy takes the quarters and leaves. "See what I mean?" The barber says. He never learns. Later, as the customer is leaving, he notices the same boy coming out of an ice cream parlor. "Hey, kid, can I ask you something? Why did you pick the quarters over the dollar bill?" The boy, enjoying his ice cream, replies, "Because if I took the dollar, the game would be over." A 17-year-old boy who works part-time at Pizza Hut pulls up to his house in a stunning Porsche. His parents are immediately suspicious, knowing there's no way his after-school job could have paid for such an expensive car. "Where did you get that car?" they shout, astonished. "I bought it today," the boy replies calmly. "With what money?" his mom demands. "We know how much a Porsche costs, and there's no way you can afford it," the boy shrugs. "It's used, and I got a great deal. I only paid $20 for it." His parents are even more shocked. "Who would sell a Porsche for $20? The woman up the street," the boy explains. "She just moved in. I delivered a pizza to her, and she offered to sell me the Porsche for $20. Baffled, his parents rush to the neighbor's house, ready for an explanation. They find her calmly planting flowers in her yard. "I'm the father of the boy you sold a Porsche to for $20, the dad says. "We need to know why you sold it so cheap." The woman, without looking up, responds, "I got a call from my husband this morning. I thought he was on a business trip in Florida, but it turns out he ran off to Hawaii with his secretary and doesn't plan on coming back." The boy's mom, still confused, asks, "But what does that have to do with selling our son a Porsche for $20? With a satisfied smile, the woman replies, "My husband told me to sell his new Porsche and send him the money, so I did." One day at school, little Johnny showed up very late to class. His teacher asked, "Why are you late today, Johnny?" Little Johnny explained, "Well, you see, just around the corner, there was a poor little old lady looking everywhere for a $20 bill. She lost. She looked quite desperate, and I just couldn't walk away." Surprised, the teacher replied, "Well then, that's actually quite nice of you to help the woman." Little Johnny said, "Help her? Heck no, my foot was standing on the bill." So a tiger was smoking a joint in the forest. A rat happened past and started laying into him. "We live in such a beautiful forest. You are such a majestic and beautiful creature. Why the hell are you killing yourself like this? Come with me and I'll show you the bliss of clean living and the loveliness that's our home in all its natural beauty." Intrigued, the tiger drops his joint and follows the rat. They happen upon an elephant chewing tobacco. The rat gives him the same spiel and admonishes him. Shamed and intrigued, the elephant follows him. The 3 of them stumble upon a lion drinking himself senseless. The rat proceeds to deliver the same lecture and gets smacked into the bushes by the lion. "He was only trying to show us a better life and the natural beauty of the forest. Why did you smack him?" protested the tiger. "That little bastard had me running around the forest like an idiot for hours. Every time he's tripping balls on LSD. Yesterday I had a flat tire on the highway, so I eased my car over to the shoulder of the road, got out, opened the trunk, took out 2 cardboard men, unfolded them, and stood them at the rear of my car facing oncoming traffic. They're dressed in open trench coats that expose their nudity to oncoming drivers. They look so lifelike, you wouldn't believe it. Traffic started slowing down to look at my lifelike men. And of course, traffic began backing up. Everyone beeped their horns and waved like crazy. It wasn't long before a state trooper pulled up behind me. When he got out of his car and started walking toward me, I could tell he wasn't a happy camper. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "My car has a flat tire," I said. "Well, what are those obscene cardboard men doing here by the road?" he demanded. I couldn't believe he didn't know, so I said, "Hello, those are my emergency flashers." A guy's walking around town when he sees a bar with a sign advertising all the beer you can drink for $1. He thinks that's a great deal, so he goes in, sits down, hands the bartender $1, and asks for a beer. "Sure, right away," says the bartender as he pulls out a tiny shot glass and fills it up halfway. The man is stunned. "What the deuce is this?" he asks. "That's all the beer you can drink for $1. A young woman meets an army officer in a hotel bar, and after a few drinks, they're getting rather close. So she asks him when the last time he had any was. The officer thinks for a second and then says, 2015. The woman gasps in shock, immediately books a room and rocks the guy's world. Afterwards, they're cuddling, and she asks him if he wants to go for dinner, and he says, "I can't. I have to be back at the base by 2300. Armed robbers burst into a bank, line up customers and staff against the wall, and begin to take their wallets, watches, and jewelry. 2 of the bank's accountants are among those waiting to be robbed. The first accountant suddenly thrusts something in the hand of the other. The second accountant whispers, "What is this?" The first accountant whispers back, "It's the $50 I owe you." So this TV station reporter was interviewing a 103-year-old guy known as the oldest person in the county. Among other things, she asked him what he thought was the greatest invention of his lifetime. He says, "Oh, that's easy. It's the thermos bottle." The startled reporter says, "Really? Why?" The old guy says, "It keeps things hot, don't it?" She says, yes, it does." He says, "It keeps things cold, don't it?" "Yeah." She says, "They do." "Right," the old guy says. "How does it know?" The day after his wife vanished in a kayaking accident, Long, a man from Anchorage, opened his door to find two serious-looking Alaska State Troopers standing before him. "Mr. Wilkins, we regret to inform you that we have news regarding your wife," one trooper began. "Tell me! Did you find her?" Wilkins blurted out anxiously. The troopers exchanged glances. One spoke. "We have some bad news, some good news, and some fantastic news. Which would you like to hear first?" Bracing himself, a pale Mr. Wilkins responded, "Give me the bad news." The trooper said, "I'm sorry, sir, but we recovered your wife's body in Kachamak Bay this morning." "Oh no!" gasped Wilkins. After a moment, he gathered himself and asked, "So, what's the good news?" The trooper explained, "Well, when we brought her up, she had 12 25-pound king crabs and 6 large Dungeness crabs attached to her. We're confident you're entitled to a share of the catch." Stunned, Wilkins asked, "If that's the good news, then what's the fantastic news?" With a straight face, the trooper replied, "We're pulling her up again tomorrow." An old couple are sitting in church when the old woman turns to her husband and says, "I just let out a silent fart, what should I do?" The husband says, "Put a new battery in your hearing aid." A few years ago, I actually got to attend the Super Bowl. During the game, I noticed there was a man with an empty seat next to him the entire time. These were very good and very expensive seats. During a timeout, I went and asked him, "Sir, if you don't mind me asking, who is this seat for?" He replied, "This was a seat for my wife that we bought months ago. Unfortunately, she has since passed away." I told him, "Oh my, I'm so sorry to hear that. Did you not find any other friends or family to come to the game?" He said, "They wanted to go to the funeral instead." There was a man whose wife was always trying to save money. She used coupons, barely ran the air conditioning, and stuff like that. She also didn't like to use the car much, to save on gas, tires, brakes, etc. Her habit annoyed her husband sometimes. One day while taking the bus home from work, the man noticed that there was often a lot of traffic, and he wondered if he could run home just as fast as the bus takes him. So the next day, he decided to try it. After work, he headed over to the bus stop, sat down, and put on a pair of sneakers. As soon as he saw the bus, he started running. He ran the entire length of the route, and he even arrived home earlier than he usually does. He thought his wife would be happy. He said to her, "Honey, I saved us $2 by not taking the bus. I jogged alongside the bus all the way home." And she thought for a moment and replied, "Awesome. Next time you can save 20 if you run beside a taxi." So after 3 years, a wife starts to think that their child looks different, so she decides to do a DNA test. She finds out that the child is actually from completely different parents. Wife, "Honey, I have something very serious to tell you." Husband, "What's wrong?" Wife, "According to DNA test results, this is not our child." Husband, "Well, don't you remember? When we were leaving the hospital, we noticed that our baby had a wet diaper and you said, 'Honey, go change the baby. I'll wait for you here.'" A powerful emperor advertised for a new chief samurai. Only 3 applied for the job: a Japanese, a Chinese, and a Jewish samurai. Number 1 samurai, "Demonstrate your skills," commanded the emperor. The Japanese samurai stepped forward, opened a tiny box, and released a fly. He drew his samurai sword and swish. The fly fell to the floor, neatly divided in 2. "What a feat," said the emperor. Number 2 samurai, "Show me what you can do." The Chinese samurai smiled confidently, stepped forward, and opened a tiny box, releasing a fly. He drew his samurai sword and swish, swish. The fly fell to the floor, neatly quartered. "That is skill," nodded the emperor. "How are you going to top that, number 3 samurai?" Number 3 samurai stepped forward, opened a tiny box, released 1 fly, drew his samurai sword, and swoosh, flourished his sword so mightily that a gust of wind blew through the room. But the fly was still buzzing around in disappointment. And the emperor said, "What kind of skill is that? The fly isn't even dead. But he will never have children." A man approached the airport counter, juggling several bags and looking slightly annoyed. As he reached the counter, the agent greeted him with a smile. "I'm flying to Los Angeles," the man said, placing his bags on the scale. "But I want this bag to go to Portland, this one to Albuquerque, and the last one to Sioux Falls." The agent blinked, her smile fading into confusion. "Sir, that's impossible. We can't send your bags to 3 different cities." The man raised an eyebrow. "Why not? You did it last time." A cop was patrolling late at night in a well-known lover spot, famous for all obscene activities. He sees a couple in a car, with the interior light brightly glowing. The cop carefully approaches the car to get a closer look. Then he sees a young man, behind the wheel, reading a computer magazine. He immediately notices a young woman in the rear seat, knitting. Puzzled by this surprising situation, the cop walks to the car and gently raps on the driver's window. The young man lowers his window. Yes, officer?" The cop says, "What are you doing?" The young man says, "Well, officer, I'm reading a magazine." Pointing towards the young woman in the back seat, the cop says, "And her, what is she doing?" The young man shrugs. "Sir, I believe she's knitting a pullover sweater." Now, the cop is totally confused. A young couple, alone in a car, at night in a lover's lane, and nothing obscene is happening. The cop asks, "What's your age, young man?" The young man says, "I'm 22, sir." The cop asks, "And her, what's her age?" The young man looks at his watch and replies, "She'll be 18 in 11 minutes. A teacher asks the kids in her 3rd grade class, what do you want to be when you grow up? Little Johnny says, I want to start out as a fighter pilot, then be a billionaire, go to the most expensive clubs, find me the finest lady, give her a Ferrari worth over $1 million, an apartment in Copacabana, a mansion in Paris, a jet to travel throughout Europe, an infinite Visa card, and all the while her like a loose screen door in a hurricane. The teacher, shocked and not knowing what to do with this horrible response from little Johnny, decides not to acknowledge what he said and simply tries to continue with the lesson. And how about you, Sarah? I want to be Johnny's lady. A woman came up to me and hit on me right in front of my wife. She told me I was handsome and that I smell nice, asked me what kind of cologne I was using. I said thank you, my wife bought it for me. It's called Leave Me the Fuck Alone. A customer in an Italian restaurant is so pleased with his meal that he insists on telling the chef personally. The owner proudly leads him into the kitchen. Your pizza is superb, the customer tells the chef. I just spent a month in Italy, and yours is better than any I ever had over there. Naturally, the chef says, over there, they use domestic cheese. Ours is imported. The 2 wives finally find some time to have a night out, just the 2 girls. After a night of happy drinking, they decide to wobble home. But on the way, both have a desperate need to pee. They nip into a cemetery, do the deed, and realize they have nothing to wipe themselves with. So one uses her underwear, and the other grabs a wreath and uses that. Next day, their husbands are talking on the phone, voicing their concerns. I'm not happy, says one husband. She came home with no underwear on. I hear you, replies the second husband in a sad voice. But if you think that's bad, my wife had a card stuck in the crack of her backside saying, from all the guys at the fire station, we'll all miss you. I was sitting on the sofa last night watching TV when my wife from the bedroom yelled, do you ever get pains on the chest like someone's got a voodoo doll and they're stabbing it? I replied, no. Then she asked, how about now? Little Johnny is playing with his electric train set in the living room, and his mom is in the kitchen when she hears him say, the train has arrived at the station. All you mother getting off, get off. And all you mother getting on, get on. She immediately scolds him for the language and puts him in timeout for 30 minutes. He comes back afterwards and resumes playing with the train. She smiles when she hears him say, the train has arrived at the station. Those getting off the train, please do so. Those getting on the train, please do so. Then he says, if you would like to make a complaint about the train being late, then go talk to the in the kitchen. One foggy night, a Yankee fan is heading north from New York, and a Red Sox fan is driving south from Boston. While crossing a narrow bridge, they hit each other head-on, mangling both cars. The Red Sox fan manages to climb out of his car and survey the damage. He looks at his twisted car and says, man, I'm lucky to be alive. Likewise, the Yankee fan gets out of his car uninjured, he too feeling fortunate to have survived. The Red Sox fan walks over to the Yankee fan and says, hey man, I think this is a sign that we should put away our petty differences and live as friends instead of being rivals. The Yankee fan thinks for a moment and says, you know, you're absolutely right. We should be friends. In fact, I'm going to see if something else survived the wreck. The Yankee fan pops open his trunk and removes a full, undamaged bottle of Jack Daniels. He says to the Red Sox fan, I think this is another sign we should toast to our newfound friendship. The Red Sox fan agrees and grabs the bottle. After sucking down half of the bottle, he hands it back to the Yankee fan and says, your turn. The Yankee fan calmly twists the cap back on the bottle, throws the bottle over the bridge into the river, and says, nah, I think I'll just wait for the cops to show up. A priest, a rabbi, and an atheist walk into a bar. The bartender points to a sign that says, no jokes served here, and asks them to leave. They head out without a word. The next day, a horse walks in. Same deal. Bartender points to the sign, and with a long face, the horse leaves. The following day, a chicken walks in. The bartender points to the sign again and says, sorry, no jokes served here. The chicken, annoyed, asks, fine, but where can I get a drink? The bartender replies, there's a bar across the road. A 7-year-old and a 4-year-old are in their bedroom. You know what? I think it's time we started swearing, said the 7-year-old. When we go downstairs for breakfast, I'll swear first. Then you. Sure, replied the 4-year-old. They make their way downstairs, and their mom asks the 7-year-old what he wants for breakfast. I'll have Frosties. Whack! He flew out of his chair, crying his eyes out. Mom looks at the 4-year-old and says sternly, and what do you want? I don't know, but it won't be Frosties. The young rabbi was an avid golfer. Even on Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, and a day for prayer and meditation, he snuck out by himself for a quick 9 holes. On the last hole, he teed off, and a gust of wind carried his ball directly over the hole and dropped it in for a hole-in-one. An angel who witnessed this miracle complained to God, this guy is playing golf on Yom Kippur, and you cause him to get a hole-in-one? This is a punishment? Of course it is, said the Lord, smiling. Who can he tell? A woman went to a doctor's office. She was seen by one of the new doctors, but after about 4 minutes in the examination room, she burst out, screaming as she ran down the hall. An older doctor stopped and asked her what the problem was, and she explained. He had her sit down and relax in another room. The older doctor marched back to the first and demanded, what's the matter with you? Mrs. Terry is 63 years old. She has 4 grown children and 7 grandchildren, and you told her she was pregnant? The new doctor continued to write on his clipboard and said, does she still have the hiccups? A famous American golfer is invited to go to China for a golfing tournament. From the second he gets there, he is treated like a king. He's given 5-star treatment in a 5-star hotel until the day of the tournament. The night before the tournament, he is sitting in his hotel room watching TV. A hot Asian girl walks up to his room and he says, "Wow, they must really love me here." They begin to have sex. Going on for the whole night, she continuously screamed,
"Zhonghui! Zhonghui!"
which he thinks means yes, yes! Later at the tournament, the American golfer gets a hole-in-one and gets really excited. He starts yelling, "Zhonghui! Zhonghui!" One of the Chinese golfers says, "What do you mean wrong hole?" An Italian guy is out picking up chicks in Roma. While at his favorite bar, he manages to attract one rather attractive-looking blonde. Back at his place, and sure enough, they go at it. After a long while, he climaxes loudly, then he rolls over, lights up a cigarette, and asks, "So you finish?" After a slight pause, she replies, "No," surprised but pleasantly. He puts out his cigarette, rolls back on top of her, and has his way with her again. This time lasting even longer than the first. And this time completing the deed with even louder shouts. Again, he rolls over, lights a cigarette and asks, "So you finish?" And again, after a short pause, she simply says, "No." Stunned but still acting reflexively on his macho pride, he once again puts out the cigarette and mounts his companion du jour. This time, with all the strength he could muster up, he barely manages to end the task. But he does after quite some time, and energy is spent. Barely able to roll over, he reaches for a cigarette, lights it again, and then asks tiredly, "So, you finish?" "No, I'm Swedish."